Hello humans, and once again, welcome to my world of stuff. Aha, fooled you. Today we're looking at WandaVision. This is something slightly different. I've been doing films and unboxings and things, but I think WandaVision is something that deserves a little segment all on its own. As of the date of recording, which is Friday the 5th of March, the final episode of this 9-episode mini-series has aired or been dropped, as they say these days, on the Disney Plus streaming service. So I thought I'd do a little overview just of the whole series and my reflections on it, my observations on it, and my hopes for the future going forward for this exciting new era in the Marvel cinematic stroke television universe. Now, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the last episode yet, move along, but come back. Because I want to talk about the whole series, and I will reference certain plot points in the final episode as much as I'm able to. Just to establish first of all that I'm a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think what they have done since 2008, when they established Iron Man in the first film, the first faltering steps in what became this incredible universe of adventure, was extremely brave, bringing a lot of second tier superhero characters to the screen and making them household names. Because I think before that, people thought of superheroes and you talk of Batman, Superman, and possibly Spider-Man. Certainly the Marvel characters weren't anything like as well known as Batman or Superman. They're the main twos because they've been around in the 60s and the 70s, and they've been around the longest after all. So it was very brave of Marvel to launch a universe based on characters who were well known amongst the fan community and the comics community, but really weren't known outside that, and it was a huge risk, a gamble that could have crashed and burned, but fortunately it paid off magnificently. And what we have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and now beyond is a new modern mythology, because I think people always need heroes. People always want characters, whether they're real people or fictional characters that you not necessarily aspire to being or even look up to, but who you enjoy spending time with and who you want to go on adventures with. And I think this is what Marvel have done now with these characters they brought to the screen so incredibly successfully, especially in the MCU, is create a gallery of characters that people now know and are invested in. And it'll be interesting to see where we go with Phase 4 now that they're digging a little deeper and bringing characters like the Eternals and Shang-Chi and various other characters who aren't quite so well known. But I think that the Marvel brand is so well established now that people will come along for the ride. Anyway, that takes us all away from WandaVision. Very exciting when Disney stroke Marvel announced that they were bringing some shows to the Disney Plus streaming service. Now, we've had Marvel characters on screen before, but they were characters on the small screen before, but they were characters that were licensed to other providers. I think ABC did the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I never really got into. The Netflix Street Level series, which were Daredevil, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and the team-up series, The Defenders, they were a bit hit and miss, because I think there were pacing issues with those particular series. I think the episodes were too long, the narratives moved too slowly, and they didn't feel like they belonged to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although there were some oblique references here and there. I think Daredevil was the best of them because he was a costume superhero in the classic form, and I did enjoy the Avengers team-up series. I thought that worked quite well, but the rest were very hit and miss. So it was interesting to hear that Marvel Studios were themselves developing television content for Disney Plus, and WandaVision, as it turns out, is the first of those shows. I think that that's mainly due to the coronavirus emergency, pandemic, because I think Falcon and Winter Soldier was due on first, but presumably I think there were some production issues there. They weren't able to finish it, so WandaVision was bumped up into the schedule. So we've now had this 9-episode extravaganza, which has been quite frankly an amazing 9 hours of, not even 9 hours actually. That's what, again, one of the nice things about it is the episodes are quite concise, 35, 40 minutes. 9 episodes of extraordinary imagination, extraordinary adventure, and I think, well, I hope, will have shown to Marvel critics and cynics that there is more to Marvel than just the whiz-bang and the CGI, although we get a bit of that in the final episode. But Marvel are able to look in depth at their characters and what makes them tick and what powers them and what saddens them, because WandaVision ultimately was a series that was all about grief and how you deal with grief and how you cope with grief and how people cope with it in different ways. Now, we've all lost loved ones, whether they're family members, lovers, pets. We've all wanted the thought what it would be like if we could bring them back just for a day, just to spend a bit more time with them. And WandaVision ultimately explores what happens with one of their characters who has the power to make this happen. Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, as she's now known, as we've always known her to be, she has the power to create her own world in which her lover, the Vision, who died at the end of Avengers Infinity War, is still alive, and she could create this fantasy world based on American sitcoms that she watched as a child in Sokovia. She was able to create memories of them and create this whole new world in which she and Vision and ultimately their children could live. Incredible series, 9 episodes, starring of course Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch, Paul Bettany as Vision, with an incredible guest turn from Catherine Zahn as Agatha, the mysterious next door neighbour who turns out to be Agatha Harkness, quite an important character in the Marvel Comics canon. Returning characters, of course, which is one of the great things about Marvel now. They can do this, bringing back minor characters who've appeared in various films. We had Randall Park back as Jimmy Woo, the sword agent who we've previously met in the last Ant-Man film. We've had Kat Dennings back as Darcy Lewis, who of course appeared as a friend of Jane Foster and appeared in some of the Thor films. We've had, controversially, Evan Peters as a new version of Quicksilver, replacing, so it appeared, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who played the character in Age of Ultron back in 2015. So a rich stew of characters, main characters in Wanda and the Vision, and interesting supporting characters from the Marvel universe. And I think it's fantastic that Marvel can do this. They can pick up these characters that we've met once or twice before. We sort of know, we might have forgotten them, to be honest, but they're able to bring them back and develop them and add extra layers to the whole universe by adding depth to these minor supporting characters. So this is the main cast of this incredible series that starts off with a couple of episodes which I think befuddled a lot of fans and angered a lot of casual viewers who tuned in for this expecting some small screen superhero action, but instead you had these largely black and white episodes set in bizarre sitcom reconstructions of, first of all, I think we had I Love Lucy in the first episode and then Bewitched in the second episode. The curious thing about this, of course, is a lot of people were complaining that these episodes were crap, it was a waste of time. But these are the same people who complain that Marvel is nothing but CGI spectacle and special effects, and as I said, all the whiz-bang flash that you get in the Marvel film. So, in a sense, Marvel were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. They tried something different that some people wouldn't take to it. I could see the logic in them, of course, as they did. They released those first 2 episodes, because I think it's undeniable that the first episode would have been a bit of a baffler for a lot of people who didn't quite know what the series was going for. I think the second episode added some interesting layers of intrigue, which would have kept an audience that wasn't convinced yet. It would have kept them on board. But I found those first 2 episodes stunning, not because I know the history of the comics, because my relationship with Marvel Comics is from the 60s, when I used to read some of the reprints that appeared in titles like Fantastic and Terrific, and then I became involved when Marvel set up in 1972 with things like Mighty World of Marvel and Spider-Man Comics Weekly. But I drifted away into the 70s and 80s, and although I've actually, during the lockdown, I've revisited some of the old comics by buying some of the old essential collections and looking back at the comics of the past. I'm not really interested in the modern stuff because it seems to me the continuity's become confused and rewritten and rebooted so many times I wouldn't know where I was. I'm not a fan of modern sort of graphic novel artwork, which makes these things a bit more adult than I think they need to be. So I've had some quite good fun going back and revisiting old Spider-Man and Daredevil and Avengers comics. So I'm not completely au fait with all the twists and turns and all the continuity references that would doubtlessly drop throughout the series, but I've picked up certain ones here and there, and it's been fun doing research to find out what that reference means and what this means and where it fits into the broader story. But ultimately, as the series goes along, we discover, of course, as we sort of suspect, that the world that Wanda and the Vision are living in isn't the real world. We see that there are outsiders observing what's going on. And it's episode 3 that sort of opens things up a little bit, when we see that we discover that when the character of Monica Rambeau is introduced, and she is played by Teyonah Parris. She is the daughter of Maria Rambeau, who we saw in the Captain Marvel film a few years ago. She's now all grown up, because of course that was set back in the 70s, I think it was, and or 80s, yeah, it was the 80s. And her mother was passed away during the blip. And this is again another nice thing. There's still ramifications ongoing from the blip at the end of Infinity War, when half the universe's population disappeared. Now we find that Monica has reappeared 5 years later, but her mother has died in the interim, so she's trying to pick up her own life, and she becomes involved in this investigation now with SWORD, which is, if you like, the replacement organisation for SHIELD, and they're investigating this strange anomaly in a place called Westview, just outside New York, which doesn't seem to exist, but there's a strange sort of barrier protecting it from the outside world. And this is where we discover a little bit more of what's going on, and we come to realise that Wanda has created this world in which she can live peacefully with the man that she loved, or the creature that she loved that's died, and she's reliving her life through the sitcoms that she grew up on. And it's very clever that the episodes take us through the 60s, 70s into the 80s style of Wonder Years type of wistful comedies, right up to date with the sort of modern family, postmodern style of sort of glances towards camera, that sort of thing. So it very cleverly establishes Wanda's world through the shows that, as we realise in episode 8, that she watched as a child. It is very much puzzle box television. You sort of have to watch it all, and then it all starts to fall into place. And it does require some patience, because if you just want some superhero action, you don't get that here. There's not a lot of action in it. There's a couple of little fights here and there, and a bit of spectacle, which does ramp up as the series goes along. But it isn't about that. It's really about Wanda and how she's coping on her own when the love of her life has died. And she does what we would all do. She creates the fantasy land that she can live in, oblivious to the outside world, and just spend some time with a version of her soulmate. It's heartbreaking, really, when you step back and set aside all the superhero aesthetic and all the colour and flash. It's a tragic tale of grief, and that's basically what it's really all about, dressed up in the sort of extraordinary adventures and extraordinary colour and imagination of the best of Marvel. It's just a stunning series. I found it pretty much faultless from beginning to end. I love the multi-layered narrative, the way that it revealed itself slowly but surely. The extraordinary reveal at the end of episode 7, of course, when we discover that Catherine Zahn's character, Agnes, it was Agatha. If I called her Agnes, I do apologise. It was Agatha all along, and that was just a stunning little moment of horror comedy, if you like. I don't know a lot about Agatha Harkness's character in the comics. I know that she was involved with the Fantastic Four, and I've done research on it, of course, because the comics continuity is so convoluted. It's hard to keep up with all the different incarnations, but I think they nailed that character here beautifully, in a fantastic performance from Catherine Zahn, who was just stunning, as everybody in the show was, really. And again, you're sort of reeling at the imagination here, and the care and attention with which this was made, and the love and attention. And this is what I admire about Marvel. Unlike DC, who just throw out these random films and hope for the best, there's a game plan with Marvel. They want to make good product. They want to surprise people. And I think WandaVision has surprised people, because it hasn't been what they expected. It hasn't been just the usual superhero spectacle. It's been an intriguing, as I say, puzzle box, a jigsaw that you have to sit through. And the beauty of it is, having watched the final episode, how it all slots together so perfectly. Everything's explained. There's nothing that makes you go, hang on, what about this, what about that? Because things all slot together. There's a couple of sort of loose ends. Again, spoiler territory if you haven't seen the latest episode. In the final episode, we had the battle between the Vision in Wanda's world and the White Vision, which is this construct that's been made by SWORD outside. Hayward, who's effectively the bad guy who wants to sort of harness this power, and he's created the White Vision from the remains of the original Vision, and there's this pitched battle, and the last episode is more what you would expect. lots of pyrotechnics when Wanda takes on Agatha, and they have this huge battle. The two visions are fighting up in the sky. It all kicks off basically. But in the middle of all that, you get that humanity and that emotion. None of that's forgotten. You understand why Wanda has done what she's done. You understand how it's driven her to places that she probably shouldn't have gone. And yet you see also Agatha Harkness, who wants that power. She wants the ability. Even though she's a super powerful witch who survived since the Salem trials, she wants what Wanda's got. And she's infiltrated Wanda's world and manipulated Wanda's world so she can weaken her. And again, without spoiling it, there's no loose ends in the story, but there's sort of little things that suggest that things are carrying on, which is what I love about it. You can watch this whole, as you can watch the Marvel films and walk away and think that was great, without worrying about the teaser bits and pieces. You can enjoy the adventure. Same with WandaVision. You can enjoy the story and then pick up on the little hints. If you haven't watched the last episode yet, please, you'll be expecting a mid-credit sequence. There's also a little sequence right at the very end which suggests that Wanda's story isn't over. And as Marvel fans, we know it isn't over because Elizabeth Olsen is, I believe, at this moment filming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness with Benedict Cumberbatch, which I think picks up from threads from WandaVision. In terms of appearances and so on, I think that as the series wore on, I was sort of expecting an appearance by Doctor Strange in the last episode, and that doesn't happen. Wasn't a disappointment. I was sort of thinking it would happen, and it would have made sense if it did. And it would be nice to see, although it's nice to see these subsidiary characters turning up, I think it would be nice to see one of the big names turn up, one of the Avengers, one of the major characters turn up on the TV show, because it would bind the cinematic universe and the TV universe even more closely together. I mean, they're bound together anyway, but I think it would be nice to see one of the big names turn up, and I think this would have been a nice place to have that cameo by Doctor Strange, particularly as the story continues in the next Doctor Strange film. That doesn't happen, but it wasn't a disappointment. It just would have been the icing on a very rich and very satisfying cake. There's so much good stuff in WandaVision. It would take me 5 of these videos just to go through every episode individually, which is what I don't want to do. I just want to do an overview of the whole thing. It was just a different direction for Marvel. It was a beautifully written, beautifully performed, beautifully produced pieces made with all the love, care and attention that we now expect from Marvel, who care about the characters, they care about the stories. More importantly, they care about us, the audience. They don't want us to be shortchanged. It's just great stuff, and as I say, it's the modern mythology. And I feel sorry for people who aren't on board with it, but this is just great, rich, imaginative stuff, and I can't recommend it highly enough. WandaVision, superb, complete masterpiece, really, which I'm looking forward to watching again very soon, and I'm in anticipation of picking up on lots of clues and hints and things that I probably didn't pick up on the first time round. It's all still available, of course, on Disney Plus if you haven't seen it yet. Really, if you don't like Marvel or you're not sure about Marvel, this is something a bit different. You might feel a bit lost at first, but stick with it because I think you'll be drawn in by the sheer cleverness and intelligence of it. In 2 weeks' time, we've got the next Marvel series, Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I think looks like a return to the core traditional values of Marvel action and adventure. I'm looking forward to that too. But in the meantime, I'm going to give WandaVision a great big fat 10 out of 10 because I just couldn't fault it. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Come back and join me soon for more stuff.
Sparky too.